studying your last two. I swim med when turned in. The styren down to mute. And can lend a pole that sunk he died.
When a corporation files its T2 corporate tax return electronically, the Canada Revenue Agency requires proper authorization from the client before the return can be transmitted. This authorization is provided through Form T183, while a separate authorization, traditionally provided through Form RC59 or now commonly through the CRA's online authorization services, allows the tax preparer to communicate with the CRA on the client's behalf. Although these forms are often discussed together, they serve two completely different purposes. Let's begin with Form T183. This form is the client's authorization for electronic filing. Before the tax preparer submits the T2 return through CRA certified tax software, the client must review the completed return, confirm that the information is accurate, and sign Form T183. By signing the form, the client authorizes the tax preparer to electronically transmit the T2 return to the Canada Revenue Agency. Without this authorization, the return should not be electronically filed. The second authorization relates to communication with the CRA. Traditionally, this was done using Form RC59, business consent. Although today many businesses provide authorization electronically through the CRA's secure online services, such as Represent a Client or Business Account. This authorization allows the accountant or tax professional to discuss the corporation's tax account with the CRA, receive correspondence and information, respond to CRA inquiries, and assist with resolving tax issues. However, this authorization does not give the accountant permission to file the tax return electronically. Its purpose is strictly to authorize representation before the CRA. It is important to understand that these two authorizations are completely independent of each other. Form T183 authorizes the electronic filing of the T2 return, while RC59, or the CRA's modern authorization process, authorizes communication and representation with the CRA. A tax preparer may have one authorization without necessarily having the other, depending on the services requested by the client. For tax preparers, following the correct procedures is essential. Always obtain the client's signed Form T183 before transmitting the T2 return electronically, and ensure that any CRA representation authorization has been properly completed before discussing confidential tax information with the CRA. Maintaining these authorizations in the client's permanent file also helps demonstrate compliance with CRA requirements. The key takeaway is simple. Form T183 authorizes electronic filing, while RC59, or its modern CRA equivalent, authorizes communication with the CRA. Understanding the difference between these two authorizations helps tax preparers protect client information, comply with CRA requirements, and provide professional corporate tax services with confidence. Before a T2 corporate tax return can be electronically filed with the Canada Revenue Agency, the tax preparer must follow a specific authorization process. This process ensures that the client has reviewed the completed tax return, confirmed that the information is accurate, and formally authorized the tax preparer to transmit the return electronically. Form T183 plays a central role in this electronic filing workflow. The first step is preparing the T2 corporate tax return. Using CRA certified tax software, the accountant gathers the corporation's financial statements, supporting schedules, tax adjustments, and other required information. Once the return has been completed, it should be carefully reviewed to ensure that all figures and disclosures are accurate before presenting it to the client. Next, the accountant meets with the client to review the completed return. During this discussion, the client has the opportunity to understand the reported income, deductions, tax calculations, and any balances owing or refunds. The tax preparer should answer any questions the client may have and ensure that the client fully understands the return before moving to the next step. Once the client is satisfied that the return is complete and accurate, the client signs Form T183. By signing this form, the client authorizes the tax preparer to electronically transmit the T2 corporate tax return to the CRA. This authorization is a mandatory part of the electronic filing process and must be obtained before the return is submitted. After receiving the signed Form T183, the tax preparer can electronically transmit the return using CRA-certified tax software. The return is securely sent to the CRA through the electronic filing system. Once the transmission is successful, the CRA provides a confirmation number acknowledging that the return has been received. The confirmation number should always be retained along with the signed Form T183 and the corporation's tax working papers. These records provide evidence that the client authorized the filing and that the return was successfully transmitted. Maintaining these documents is an important part of professional record-keeping and CRA compliance. Both the client and the tax preparer have specific responsibilities in this process. The client is responsible for reviewing the return, confirming that the information is correct, and signing Form T183. The tax preparer is responsible for preparing the return accurately, explaining the contents to the client, obtaining the signed authorization, filing the return electronically, and securely retaining the signed form and CRA confirmation. The most important rule to remember is simple. Never electronically transmit a T2 corporate tax return before obtaining the client's signed Form T183. This authorization protects both the client and the tax preparer and ensures that the electronic filing process complies with CRA requirements. Following this workflow helps maintain accuracy, security, and professionalism throughout the corporate tax preparation process. Authorizing a tax preparer to communicate with the Canada Revenue Agency is a separate process from authorizing the electronic filing of a T2 corporate tax return. While Form T183 allows the return to be submitted electronically, CRA representation authorization allows an accountant or tax professional to access the corporation's tax information and interact with the CRA on the client's behalf. Understanding this distinction is essential for every corporate tax preparer. The process begins when the corporation grants authorization to its representative. Traditionally, this was done using Form RC59, business consent. Today, many corporations provide this authorization electronically through the CRA's secure online services, such as Represent a Client or Business Account. Regardless of the method used, the purpose remains the same: to allow the designated tax professional to represent the corporation before the CRA. Once the authorization has been processed by the CRA, the representative receives access to the corporation's tax account according to the level of permission granted by the client. This secure authorization enables the tax preparer to perform a variety of important tasks. For example, they can view account balances, discuss CRA notices and correspondence, respond to CRA inquiries, request additional information, and assist the corporation in resolving tax issues. These services allow tax professionals to work more efficiently and help clients manage their tax affairs without requiring the client to contact the CRA directly for every matter. An important point to remember is that the client remains in control of the authorization at all times. The corporation decides who is authorized to represent it, what level of access is granted, and can modify or revoke that authorization whenever necessary. Tax preparers should always respect the scope of the authority granted and ensure that client information is handled securely and confidentially. Professional record-keeping is also important. Tax preparers should retain copies of authorization confirmations or related documentation in the client's permanent file. These records demonstrate that the representative has been properly authorized and provide evidence of compliance with CRA requirements. Perhaps the most important concept in this topic is understanding that electronic filing authorization and CRA representation are two separate responsibilities. Form T183 authorizes the transmission of the T2 corporate tax return, while RC59, or the CRA's current online authorization process, allows the representative to communicate with the CRA about the corporation's tax affairs. One does not replace the other, and depending on the services being provided, a tax preparer may need one or both authorizations. The key takeaway is simple. Before interacting with the CRA on behalf of a corporation, ensure that proper authorization has been granted. At the same time, remember that electronic filing requires its own separate authorization through Form T183. Understanding these two authorization processes helps protect client privacy, ensures compliance with CRA procedures, and allows tax professionals to provide efficient and trustworthy corporate tax services.